Welcome to day 2 from our Inner Child Healing Workshop. Today we're going to discuss in more detail about some signs that have perhaps are occurring in our adulthood and to pay attention to. And then we're going to look into some shadow work that can be done personally and individually to help you start the process of recognizing your inner child and working through it, accepting it, and then healing it. So, as I said yesterday, minor trauma is very common in childhood. So, even the healthiest of childhoods, where you feel like my childhood was perfect, it was so healthy and so happy, that doesn't mean that you don't have any inner childhood work to do. So, everybody has to go through this. Of course, if you've experienced major trauma, the results obviously are going to be much deeper. There's going to be need of perhaps more professional help. So there are levels to this whole thing. So as an adult, we might start recognizing and bringing awareness to certain patterns and cycles that we go through and certain behaviors that we put forward in our everyday life, whether it's through reactions, thoughts, beliefs, or feelings. Now, when our inner child has not really been met and dealt with, and especially healed if there is that trauma, we're going to have to deal with certain things. And in adulthood, it starts to show up within our personality. So we start to experience things that are a little bit more destructive, perhaps, and defense mechanisms, and behaviors that are maladaptive and repetitive usually. So it could be things like self-sabotaging, self-defeating behaviors, self-harming behaviors, even addiction, violent behaviors, passive-aggressive behaviors. So all of those are related to the way we were treated as a child, which is crazy for some to think of, but it is so relatable. So actually, it is not something rare. It's very common. Everybody has something to deal with. A damaged child is impulsive, narcissist, dependent, needy, and afraid. And most of the time, they suffer from loneliness. So, especially from this essence of feeling abundant, because the world is gigantic for them. They are just this tiny little human. So, the environment and their surrounding is so critical. So, it is easy to fall into that trap as children have not learned how to regulate and assess and manage emotions or even associate logic from reasoning. And it's just for them, everything is just as it comes, and they have to take time to understand and develop that understanding, which later on comes into teen and young adulthood and eventually adulthood. So this is where we start to think, oh, my child is acting out, or the whining or the reactive behavior, when in reality we haven't checked in with ourselves what we have passed forward or passed on or said or did or behaved or acted as that reflected that behavior to them. So this work is not only for us, but if you are a parent, it's also for your children, which is critical because we don't recognize what damage we might be doing. Just simple words that we use every day or now and again. So let's discuss in more detail what are some signs that you can notice that your inner child needs a little bit of work. So it could be feelings of highly reactive. So we can notice when our wounded inner child appears, usually just in our everyday life, by recognizing certain situations that trigger you, making you feel very reactive and perhaps negative emotions related to that, irritated, frustration, disappointment, anger, whatever it is. Our adult self is actually trying to manage and control the outside world that's making them feel uncomfortable at the time. Another sign could be overvaluing independence. So this can look like repeating the narrative, I don't need anyone, I'm independent, I can do everything by myself, I don't accept help. Not allowing yourself to ever ask for help or show vulnerability. Another sign could be destructive coping behavior. This could look like something as addiction, alcohol, shopping, cheating, gambling, food, chronic procrastination. So there's an embedded reason why you might be doing that, dating back to your childhood. And then another sign could be poor emotional and mental health. So this can show up in so many ways: depression, anxiety, feeling unmotivated, wanting more time alone, or with friends, the opposite. They're both avoidance mechanisms, so we are trying to avoid dealing with the truth. Commitment issues, sleep difficulties, weight gain or loss, not as focused or as productive in whatever it is that you are doing, increased stress in your life. And then one more sign could be repeating patterns in your relationships, and these are all types of relationships. So of course we learn attachment from childhood, and so the way that our adults in our life, children as well, not just adults, but caretakers, neighbors, relatives, whoever it was that was surrounding us in our life at the time, reflected a form of relationship that had unconsciously created a concept of what relationships are. So, for example, our relationship with our mother might have been different than with our father. Of course, it is different with friends, and so on and so forth. So, the experiences we had have created this pattern that we are using now in life as adults. So, if we do have inner child trauma, then we are repeating certain behaviors in our relationships and certain patterns that we might have experienced as a child. So, for example, we could be avoiding conflicts, or when a partner brings up certain situations that bring up certain feelings inside of you. So, there's an avoidance mechanism. It could be that you are dismissive of a partner's needs, or even your own in the relationship, so there's no balance. Be gaslighting yourself into believing that there aren't problems when they truly are, or vice versa, creating problems when there aren't. Being anxious and fearful in a relationship, this is where jealousy and commitment issues come in. People pleasing kind of behaviors that you want to do above and beyond for everybody. Then one more is that we feel abandoned, and this fear of being lonely and rejected. So we tend to compensate our relationships for that experience or feeling. Now, all of these signs can be represented back to an experience in childhood. So, as I said, of course, is the relationships we had, but also certain situations or experiences within our environment at the time. So, you could have experienced things like a loss of a parent or guardian, physical abuse or neglect, emotional abuse or neglect, sexual abuse, serious illness, severe bullying, could have experienced natural disasters, or being a refugee, changing countries and experiencing that difference, family breakups, being a victim of violence. And then there are deeper things such as substance abuse, domestic violence in the household, mental illness in a family member, or even physical illness that you became a caretaker for, and feelings of isolated when your needs and wants and wishes and desires were just simply not met. So those are a reflection now into adulthood, and you had created a defense mechanism, and you are now allowing that into your everyday life, and the way you react, the way you speak, the way you think, the way you feel, all of these are affected now because of those behaviors and mechanisms that you had learned as a childhood due to your experience and your environment and your relationships. Now we're going to look into some shadow work. So, shadow work is a practice of healing and self-growth, which means that it requires to surrender and accept. So, instead of being judgmental and attacking and creating guilt about your thinking, your feeling, your reactions, your behaviors, you're going to look into it in a more understanding, compassionate, and loving and caring way. So now, as we spoke about inner childhood wounds yesterday and today, we're going to understand the shadows that are created in our subconscious that can be brought forward into our conscious. So our shadow self is basically our inner child that has been neglected, kind of ignored, put to the side. Greatest opportunity is to building strength to heal those wounds and bring our inner child, our original inner child, forward. So our shadow is where our true pain and trauma is really living in, waiting for the light of our attention. So it lies beneath the distractions of every day, whatever it is that we're doing, that we're not paying attention to that. It lies right there. So it is anything that has to do with the basically the basement of our psyche that we're not cleaning up. We're just ignoring, and I'm going to get to it at some point. Perhaps you have an awareness, but you're not getting to it, not just yet. Or you have started but did not continue. So there's no consistency, that persistent, necessary pattern. We avoid shadow work when we are overachieving things. So spiritually bypassing under the guise of self-improvement. So we contend to our pain if we are still focusing on this false positivity. So it is very important to be positive in life, but there is a false positivity in the essence of everything's perfect, everything is fantastic, everything is beautiful. But we don't acknowledge the dark sides. Everyone has dark sides, everyone has shadows. So we must find the balance. And through self-improvement is not necessarily just everything on a high level of positivity. There is also the low side of it to deal with. So this is where we need to kind of like open the door and start working into. A very common avoidance of shadow work is when we start to overwork, to stay distracted and to not look into the darkness. So if I just keep working hard, I'll get what I want and I'll be happy. It's not the case. There's always these underlying issues that we're not dealing with, and it will always, somewhere or another, show in our everyday life because it's part of our personality, it's part of our being, of who we are right now. So it's not about constantly doing good and then good things will happen to you. It's not just that. You need to make the effort. It is actually a physical effort as much as it is a mental and emotional one. Of course, another sign of avoiding your shadow work would be any type of addictive behavior, overconsumption, and just very maladaptive habits. Using mood-altering substances, to overbuying things, just this necessary connection to materialism. It's just all temporary, and we're just hiding the truth of what we really need to ultimately be doing. And then also another sign of avoiding shadow work would be just hanging around and lingering into relationships that are not beneficial for us. They're just superficial, and avoiding being truly seen, heard, felt, just living your truth. So as I said, everybody has shadow work that they need to deal with. It is a survival mechanism, and we tend to avoid it in order not to deal with wounds and past trauma. And ultimately we need to be doing the opposite so we can keep carrying to give ourselves opportunity to live the truth that is within us and grow in a flourished way with the good and the bad. A few things you need to recognize in order to do shadow work. You're not alone. Everyone needs to do shadow work. Everyone has shadows to deal with. So first and most, you're not alone. So it's basically this concept of learning to love your most wounded self. It's not just your best self. Oh, I'm great at this, and focusing only on your gifts and your talents. You must acknowledge, accept, and allow your wounds, your hurt, your pain, and your negative self to be accepted and come forth. Now, unfortunately, when you're doing that, you're going to have to feel the original pain. So for a lot of us who have had deep trauma, you're going to have to revisit it, unfortunately. So that's why I said you might need professional help. So depending on the level of trauma and depending the level of wounds that you're dealing with, you might need assistance with that. And that's okay. There's no harm in that, because it's important to get over that, and it's important to experience it again and to relate it and bring the memory forth, because you are just hiding it, and all it's doing is eating away in the background, somewhere there in the basement of the psyche. So it's important to bring it forth. Now you need to understand that the subconscious sometimes is very difficult to recognize. That's why it needs a long time to work through, because it doesn't speak in a logic sense as we know it. It's kind of speaks in symbols. So it allows you to, this shadow work allows you to follow the trail of emotion to the source of your problem. That's why you need to dig into it and allow it to kind of guide you. So basically, after unhealed painful experiences, the resulting beliefs and behavioral patterns invade every corner of our psyches like a weed, impacting our ability to realize our desires and wishes and our truth. Unfortunately, the problems that this might have in our pain or our wound cannot be understood in a logical way. It's more symbolic. So you have to shift your mindset to understand it and bring it forth from the subconscious to the conscious. And then what happens is, because everything is related in this deep symbolic recess of our inner world, when you're healing one thing, it starts to create a positive ripple and starts to change many things that you might not even know are related in your life. So to start off with, you need to understand what that feeling is. How does it feel? You sit and breathe through that emotion when you are relating back to your childhood or a specific event, a situation, or trauma. So you are now relating the past to the present. You're anchoring into the present day feeling that will help you understand the past feeling and creates a trail of where the feeling originated from. Then you can look into what word, memory, or image comes to mind with that feeling. Now, it's important not to push yourself too heavily here to come up with something that you are logically trying to make sense of that is meaningful, but allow it to flow freely. Just notice the first thing that comes up when you start to feel that emotion again, and accept whatever it is. And even if you don't understand it, that's okay. And then sometimes multiple things show up. So then it becomes a little bit of a jargon and confusion, and that's okay. Write it down. Write down the feeling and what comes up, what imagery, what is associated with. So when that comes forth, then you move into the next step where you start to go into that memory or that image that comes to mind and connecting to that inner child. So you simply set this intention and energetically reach out to that inner child, and whatever appears in your inner awareness, allow it to be. And then the next step would be to allow that inner child to speak to you and to listen deeply. What is my inner child trying to say? What was the experience? What was the situation at the time? What are these feelings related to? So have this back and forth conversation with your inner child mentally. Write it down if you wish, and allow this healing process to start. Then continue this dialogue until you feel a sense of completion. Follow your intuition, listen deeply, try not to bring logic in the place. Don't forget about judgments and making yourself feel a certain way. Just be for just a moment. And don't try to look for something specific. Again, no reasoning. Just allow it to be. And allow it to happen more than once. Because every time we experience something new and we bring forth something new, when you start to practice in this manner, finally just sit with any residual feelings and allow them to dissolve. Just let it be. Sometimes just feeling your feelings is enough to create healing. Allow that process to occur. It is a very powerful process. It's sensitive and it needs time. But the most important is that you do it, that you take action. As a final note, you can utilize the workbook, and there you'll have a time or space to do some shadow work, lettering to yourself. So when you do that, reflect in your journal, write it down, whatever the experience was, do it as many times as you like, and then speak to yourself in the present, and in a kind, loving, understanding way, in the present moment, you to you, and allow yourself to integrate everything you experienced in the present moment. And then with shadow work, it's important to ask the necessary questions. So write down your questions. What are the questions you want to ask yourself? What are the questions you want to ask your inner child? And what are the questions you want to find out about your past? For example, what do you need me to do in order to nourish myself? Do you believe that I need to stop overworking? Do you need me to break up with situations that are not helping me in life? So you start to bring these questions forward that are already in your mind. You just bring them forward, write them, and answers will start coming through. So again, writing is a great method of releasing. As we said, we're tapping into the inner child, so we're going to do a little bit more creative work. And expressing yourself is truly very relieving and brings the subconscious to the conscious connection. So in our workbook, you'll notice a little exercise in conjunction with the letter to yourself. So take time to go through that, and do it whenever you feel you're ready to do it. And that's it for today. Looking through all these signs and shadow work, I hope you intake as much information as you can and look through it even more. Do your own research, find some guidance deeper into what you're looking for. And I look forward to discussing about more healing methods tomorrow on day 3, our final day.